The engagement ring felt cold against my palm when I finally took it off. 3 months of planning, dress fittings, venue deposits, all reduced to this small circle of platinum sitting in my jewelry box like evidence of a crime. I stared at it for a long time, thinking about how quickly trust can shatter when the right lie finds the right ear at exactly the wrong moment. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning. Andrew's voice was different, strained, like he'd been practicing what to say. "We need to talk," he said, and I knew immediately that whatever came next would change everything. I met him at the coffee shop where we'd had our first date 2 years ago. He sat across from me, hands folded, eyes avoiding mine. "Someone came to see me yesterday," he began. "About your past." I felt my stomach drop, but I kept my voice steady. "What about my past?" "About what happened in college. About the plagiarism incident." The world tilted. I gripped my coffee cup tighter, feeling the heat burn through the ceramic. "What plagiarism incident?" Andrew finally looked at me. His face was a mixture of hurt and confusion. "Olivia, please don't lie to me." "Not now. Sarah told me everything. How you stole her thesis, how you got her expelled instead. How you've been lying about it for years." Sarah Mitchell. My childhood friend. The girl who used to braid my hair during sleepovers and promise we'd be sisters forever. The same Sarah who hadn't spoken to me in 3 years, not since I got the promotion she thought she deserved at Henderson and Associates. I should have seen this coming. "Andrew," I said carefully, "that never happened." "I don't know what Sarah told you, but—" "She had documentation," he interrupted. "Emails, drafts with timestamps." "Olivia, she was crying when she told me. She said she couldn't watch me marry someone who destroyed her life and got away with it." I sat there, speechless, watching the man I loved believe a lie so carefully constructed it sounded like truth. The worst part wasn't his doubt. It was the relief in his voice, like he'd finally found a reason to justify the cold feet he'd been hiding for weeks. "I need time," he said, standing up. "I need to think about all of this." He left me sitting there with 2 untouched lattes and the sudden understanding that some betrayals cut so deep they change the shape of your entire world. That night, I called Sarah. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. "Olivia," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I heard about you and Andrew. I'm sorry it didn't work out." "What did you tell him?" "The truth," she said simply. "Something I should have done years ago." "It's not the truth, and you know it." There was a pause. Then she laughed, soft and cold. "Prove it." The line went dead. I spent the next 3 days in a haze, fielding calls from concerned friends and family members who'd heard about the broken engagement. I gave them the sanitized version: we grew apart, realized we wanted different things, the usual breakup script. But inside, I was cataloging every detail I could remember about college, about Sarah, about the thesis that had never existed the way she described it. Sarah had always been competitive, even as kids. When we were 12, she convinced our entire friend group that I'd cheated on a spelling bee because she couldn't accept that I'd won. When we were 16, she spread rumors that I was bulimic because I'd lost weight over the summer. She had a gift for taking truth and twisting it just enough to make it unrecognizable, then presenting her version with such conviction that people believed her over me. But this was different. This was calculated, professional. She'd spent time crafting this lie, creating evidence, waiting for the perfect moment to deploy it. The question was, how far had she gone? I started with our mutual friends from college. Most of them were polite but distant, the way people get when they're not sure which version of events to believe. But Jessica Reynolds, my old roommate, was different. She met me for lunch on Friday, sliding into the booth across from me with a grim expression. "I've been waiting for someone to ask me about this," she said without preamble. "Sarah called me 2 weeks ago. She wanted to know if I remembered anything about your senior thesis, specifically if I remembered you having any conflicts with other students. What did you tell her? The truth. That you worked harder than anyone I knew, that you spent months in the library, that your advisor practically worshipped you. She didn't like that answer. Jessica leaned forward. Olivia, she asked me about a dozen specific scenarios. Things that never happened. It was like she was fishing for something that would stick. Did she ask anyone else? That's what I wanted to talk to you about. She's been making calls. Lots of them. I heard from Amy Chen that Sarah contacted her too, asking about a party where supposedly you got blackout drunk and confessed to cheating. Amy told her that party never happened, but Sarah kept pushing, asking if maybe Amy just didn't remember it clearly. The picture was becoming clearer. Sarah hadn't just told one lie to Andrew. She'd been conducting research, looking for anyone who might corroborate a false narrative, and when she couldn't find willing participants, she'd manufactured the evidence herself. That weekend, I drove to my parents' house in Millbrook. I needed space to think, and I needed access to things I'd stored in their attic. My college papers, my old laptop, anything that might help me understand exactly what Sarah had fabricated and how. My mother took one look at me and pulled me into the kitchen. You look terrible, she said, which was her way of saying she loved me. What's really going on with Andrew? I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her face growing darker with each detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Sarah always was a troubled child, she said finally. Even when you were little, there was something off about the way she competed with you. Your father and I used to worry about that friendship. Why didn't you ever say anything? You were happy. She made you laugh. We thought maybe we were being paranoid. She reached across the table and took my hand. We should have trusted our instincts. In the attic, I found my old thesis materials. Boxes of research notes, printed articles, draft copies with my advisor's comments scrawled in red ink. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, organized and documented. I also found something else, a folder of letters and cards from Sarah over the years. Birthday wishes, graduation congratulations, job celebration notes. I read through them, looking for. I wasn't sure what. Inconsistencies, maybe. Evidence of the resentment that had been building beneath our friendship. I found it in a card from 3 years ago, congratulating me on my promotion at Henderson and Associates. The front was cheerful, covered in gold stars and exclamation points. But inside, her handwriting was different. Tighter. So proud of you for getting everything you've always wanted, she'd written. Some people are just luckier than others, I guess. It was subtle, but it was there. The bitterness, carefully disguised as support. That night, I called my old thesis advisor, Dr. Patricia Hawkins. She was retired now but still sharp, still remembered her students with startling clarity. Olivia Carter, she said warmly when I identified myself. Of course I remember you. Your work on post-colonial identity markers was brilliant. What can I do for you? I explained the situation, trying to keep my voice professional despite the humiliation of having to defend myself against accusations of academic dishonesty. Dr. Hawkins was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Olivia, I need you to know something. About 2 months ago, I received a very strange phone call from someone claiming to be a graduate student researching academic integrity cases from the early 2000s. She asked specifically about you, about whether there had ever been any questions about your work. I told her absolutely not, that your thesis was exemplary, but she kept pushing. She wanted to know about other students in your year, whether anyone had ever accused anyone else of plagiarism. My heart started racing. Did she give you a name? She said her name was Susan Miller, but the whole conversation felt off. She knew too much about you specifically, and too little about actual research methodology. I hung up thinking it was some kind of fishing expedition. Susan Miller. Close enough to Sarah Mitchell to be believable, different enough to avoid immediate detection. She'd been planning this for months. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the public library. I needed a neutral location with strong internet and printing capabilities. I was going to find out exactly what Sarah had been doing, and I was going to document every bit of it. I started with social media. Sarah's profiles were mostly private, but her professional LinkedIn was public. I screenshotted everything: her employment history, her connections, her recent activity. Then I moved to public records. Property transactions, court filings, anything that might give me insight into her current situation. What I found was illuminating. Sarah had been let go from her job at Peterson Marketing 6 months ago. The reason wasn't listed, but the timeline was interesting. Her LinkedIn showed she'd been consulting independently since then, which usually meant unemployed. I also found evidence of financial stress: a lien on her condo, 2 credit card judgments, a bankruptcy filing that had been withdrawn. She was desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. Next, I contacted a private investigator. I'd never hired one before, but Jessica's husband worked in corporate security and gave me a referral. David Park was professional, discreet, and expensive. I told him what I needed: a comprehensive investigation of Sarah's recent activities, her financial situation, and any evidence of the fabricated documents she'd shown Andrew. "This kind of targeted harassment isn't uncommon," he said after I explained the situation. "Usually there's a paper trail. People who manufacture evidence often reuse techniques, and they usually aren't as careful as they think they are. Give me a week." While I waited for David's report, I focused on my own documentation. I scanned every piece of college-related material I could find. I reached out to more classmates, asking careful questions about their interactions with Sarah. I even drove back to my university and spent a day in the registrar's office, obtaining official transcripts and academic records. The picture that emerged was of someone who'd been planning this attack for much longer than I'd initially realized. 3 different college friends told me about recent calls from Sarah, all with the same theme: fishing for negative information about me, trying to plant seeds of doubt about my character or academic integrity. Andrew finally called me on Thursday evening. His voice was softer than it had been at the coffee shop, but still distant. "I've been thinking about everything," he said. "And I need to ask you directly, did you ever cheat in college? Did you ever do anything that would give someone a reason to make these accusations?" I took a deep breath. "Andrew, I have never cheated on anything in my life. Not in college, not in high school, not on a board game. What Sarah told you is a complete fabrication, and I can prove it." "How?" "Give me until next week. I'm putting together documentation that will show you exactly what's been happening and why." There was a long pause. "Olivia, I want to believe you." "I do. But the evidence she showed me was convincing. Timestamps, email chains, even a recording of what she said was you confessing to taking her work." "A recording?" That was new information. "Andrew, did you make copies of anything she showed you?" "She said it was too sensitive to leave copies. That she was only showing me because she cared about both of us." "Of course she did." No evidence meant no way to verify her claims independently. It was a classic manipulation tactic: create urgency, limit access to information, and force an emotional decision before logical analysis could take place. "Andrew," I said carefully, "I need you to think about something. In the 2 years you've known me, have I ever lied to you about anything significant? Have I ever done anything that would suggest I'm capable of the kind of systematic deception Sarah is describing?" Another pause. "No," he admitted. "That's what's been bothering me. It doesn't fit with who you are. But the evidence can be fabricated," I finished. "Especially by someone with the skills and motivation to do it right." David Park called me Friday morning with his preliminary findings. His voice was grim. Olivia, you need to be very careful with this person. What I've found suggests a pattern of targeted harassment that goes back several years. He'd traced Sarah's recent activities through credit card records, phone logs, and digital footprints. The picture was disturbing. She'd been researching me extensively, my social media, my professional history, even my personal relationships. She'd contacted at least a dozen people from my past, always with subtle questions designed to elicit negative information. The fake documents she created for your fiancé are sophisticated, David continued. She used email spoofing software to create messages that appear to be from your college email account. The timestamps are manipulated but done skillfully. She also created a fake social media profile using photos of someone who looks similar to you and used it to create a false history of academic problems. How is that legal? It's not. What she's done constitutes identity fraud, defamation, and possibly cyberstalking. You have grounds for both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit. But legal action would take months, maybe years. I needed something faster, something that would expose Sarah's lies immediately and completely. I needed to beat her at her own game. That weekend, I developed my plan. If Sarah wanted to play with documentation and evidence, I would give her documentation and evidence. But mine would be real. I started by creating a comprehensive timeline of Sarah's recent activities, corroborated by multiple sources. Phone records showing her calls to my friends and former classmates. Financial records showing her desperate situation. Screenshots of her fake social media profiles. David's investigation had provided most of this, but I organized it into a clear, compelling narrative. Next, I reached out to Dr. Hawkins again. This time, I asked her to provide a written statement about my academic performance, specifically addressing the accusations Sarah had made. She was happy to help, and her letter was detailed and unambiguous. My work had been exemplary, original, and thoroughly documented. She also included information about the suspicious phone call she'd received from Susan Miller. I contacted the university's academic integrity office and requested a formal statement confirming that I had never been the subject of any disciplinary action. The process took 3 days and cost $50, but the result was official letterhead stating clearly that no charges of academic dishonesty had ever been filed against me. Finally, I hired a digital forensics expert to analyze the fake documents Sarah had created. This was expensive, but the expert was able to identify clear signs of manipulation, altered metadata, inconsistent formatting, and digital signatures that didn't match the supposed dates of creation. By Wednesday, I had assembled a comprehensive dossier proving that Sarah's accusations were fabricated. But I didn't want to just clear my name. I wanted to make sure she could never do this to anyone else. I called Andrew and asked him to meet me, along with Sarah, on Friday evening. I told him I had something to show both of them that would resolve the situation permanently. He was hesitant, but he agreed. I chose the location carefully, the conference room at Henderson and Associates. Professional, neutral, with excellent lighting and recording capabilities. I arrived early and set up my laptop, my printed documents, and a digital recorder. Everything was going to be documented. Sarah arrived first, looking nervous but trying to hide it behind a mask of righteous indignation. She was dressed professionally, carrying a leather portfolio that I assumed contained more fake evidence. "Olivia," she said coolly. "I hope you're not planning to drag this out. Andrew deserves to know the truth." "I agree completely," I said. "That's exactly what he's going to get." Andrew arrived a few minutes later, looking uncomfortable. He sat between us, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. "Before we start," I said, "I want everyone to know that I'm recording this conversation. Sarah, you've made serious accusations about my character and my past. I think it's important that we have a clear record of what's said here tonight." Sarah's confidence flickered for just a moment. "That's fine," she said. "I have nothing to hide." I opened my laptop and projected the first slide onto the conference room screen. It was a timeline of Sarah's recent activities, the phone calls to my friends, the visits to former classmates, the fake graduate student inquiry to Dr. Hawkins. "Sarah," I said, "over the past 3 months, you've contacted at least 15 people from my past, asking leading questions designed to elicit negative information about me. You've created fake email accounts, false social media profiles, and forged documents. You've committed identity fraud, defamation, and cyberstalking. And you've done it all because you blame me for problems in your own life." Sarah's face went pale, but she rallied quickly. "That's ridiculous. I came forward because I couldn't watch Andrew marry someone who..." "Someone who what?" I interrupted. "Someone who got the promotion you wanted. Someone who succeeded where you failed. Someone who never did anything to hurt you except exist in the same space as your insecurities?" I clicked to the next slide, Sarah's financial records, her job loss, her legal troubles. "This is why you're really here, isn't it? You're drowning, and instead of getting help, you decided to drag me down with you." "Those records are private," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "How did you?" "The same way you got mine," I said calmly. "The difference is, mine are real." I spent the next 30 minutes methodically dismantling every piece of evidence Sarah had presented to Andrew. The fake emails were exposed by their manipulated metadata. The fabricated confession recording was revealed to be a patchwork of audio clips stolen from my social media posts and altered with voice synthesis software. The supposed witnesses to my academic dishonesty were shown to be either fictional or people who had explicitly contradicted Sarah's claims. Andrew sat in stunned silence, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and something that might have been relief. Sarah tried to interrupt several times, but I kept going, presenting document after document, expert analysis after expert analysis, until her lies were completely demolished. "The most disturbing part," I said, advancing to my final slide, "is that this wasn't a moment of weakness or poor judgment. This was a sustained campaign of harassment spanning months. Sarah spent more time and energy trying to destroy my life than she did trying to fix her own." I turned to face her directly. "You knew Andrew had been having doubts about our engagement. You could see that he was vulnerable to the right kind of manipulation. So you crafted a lie specifically designed to give him an excuse to leave me, and you presented it at exactly the moment when he was most likely to believe it." Sarah's composure finally cracked. "You don't understand," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You've always had everything. The grades, the jobs, the perfect life. It was supposed to be my turn." "It was your turn," I said quietly. "You had the same opportunities one did. You made different choices." Andrew finally spoke. "Sarah, how could you do this? How could you lie about something so serious?" She looked at him with desperate eyes. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought if you knew what she was really like." "What I'm really like," I said, "is someone who works hard, treats people fairly, and doesn't lie to get what I want. What you're really like is someone who commits felonies rather than face the consequences of your own decisions." I closed my laptop and gathered my documents. "Andrew, I've given you everything you need to make an informed decision. Sarah, you have 48 hours to publicly retract your accusations and issue a formal apology, or I will file criminal charges and a civil lawsuit that will make your current financial problems look like a minor inconvenience." I stood up and walked toward the door. "One more thing, Sarah. If you ever contact me, Andrew, or anyone in my life again, I will not be this generous with my response." I left them sitting in the conference room and drove home, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks: peace. Andrew called me the next morning. His voice was different again, warmer, but also cautious. "Olivia, I owe you an apology. I should have trusted you from the beginning. I should have known that someone who's been nothing but honest with me for 2 years wouldn't suddenly be capable of the kind of deception Sarah described." "You were manipulated by an expert," I said. Someone who's been planning this for months and who knew exactly which buttons to push. Can you forgive me? I thought about it. Could I forgive him for believing a lie over his direct experience of who I was? Could I forgive him for being willing to throw away our relationship based on the word of someone he barely knew? I can forgive you, I said finally. But I can't forget how quickly you were willing to believe the worst about me. That says something about how you see me, or maybe about how you see yourself. There was a long pause. What does that mean for us? It means we have work to do. If we're going to build a life together, it has to be based on trust that doesn't evaporate the moment someone tells you a convincing lie. I want to do that work, he said. If you'll let me. Sarah issued her public apology 2 days later, posting it on all her social media accounts and sending copies to everyone she had contacted with her lies. It was thorough, humiliating, and completely accurate. She admitted to fabricating evidence, acknowledged the harm she had caused, and took full responsibility for her actions. I didn't respond to it. I didn't need to. Andrew and I started couples counseling the following week. It was slow, sometimes painful work, but it was necessary. We had to rebuild trust from the ground up, and we had to address the insecurities that had made him vulnerable to Sarah's manipulation in the first place. 6 months later, we got engaged again. This time, it felt different. Stronger. Built on a foundation of tested trust rather than assumed compatibility. Sarah moved away from town 3 months after her apology. I heard through mutual friends that she was getting therapy and trying to rebuild her life in a healthier way. I hoped that was true. Not for my sake, but for hers, and for anyone else who might cross her path. The engagement ring sits on my finger now, warm and solid. Sometimes I think about how different things might have been if Sarah's plan had worked, if Andrew had married someone who would believe lies over evidence, fear over trust. In a strange way, her betrayal had revealed something important about both of us. Some people try to tear others down when they can't build themselves up. But the strongest foundations are the ones that survive earthquakes, and the truest relationships are the ones that can weather the most sophisticated lies. Sarah had taught me something valuable, though I doubt she intended to, that sometimes the most devastating attacks come from the people who know you best, and the most important victories are the ones where you refuse to become the villain in someone else's story. The truth had set me free, but first, it had made me fight.
Did you enjoy watching Karma strike back against a toxic friend? Subscribe to Karma's Counter-Strike for more betrayal and justice stories. And share your own friendship betrayal experiences in the comments.